Good morning friends, Namaskar, Sat Sri Akal and Adab. This is my 228th video and this will be covering the point of General Land Register. This is the most important thing which most of our bungalow owners want to understand, and most of the bungalow owners and residents do not have their full volume GLR. So what is General Land Register? And how can we, with this General Land Register and the laws written up there, prove that we are private lands? So these lands were classified, whether they were A, B or C, as private properties or not, which do not come under the management of the military state officer or the defense state officer, or even I would put it to the Cantonment Executive Officer. Now we need to interpret and connect the rules and sections which are going to be referred. So here's a structural approach which I'll give you today. So whether we B3 land, old grant cum leasehold are private properties or not. So what is the definition of private properties? Beginning by defining what constitutes private properties within the cantonment area, particularly those lands that fall outside the bazaar area and are registered under the Transfer of Properties Act 1882, specifically section 45, 59, 107 and 123. So if you read these sections, you will understand everything of the TPA Act. So what is the discussion now? So the discussion purely stands on to establish that certain lands do not fall under the management of the MEO, DO or CO, but are private lands and have to be just managed under the three governing rules. So where is it written? Section, if we read A, where we will talk of management of land under Rule 9. What does Rule 9 say? It says that B3 and B4 lands, as discussed, are to be managed by cantonment boards. Lands which are notified for bazaar area as per the Defense Department notification. Now we must understand that Rule 9 in 1937 and when the Rule 3 also speaks of the civil area. So the key point which was emphasized in this rule specifically applies to lands within bazaar area and underlines that any land outside these are not under the management of the department. So department means DO, CO and MEO. DO and MEO had the same similar vice versa names. Now Rule 9.3, management of lands under the MEO. Now his role is explained that MEO will manage again class B3 lands and B4 lands. Now lands outside the bazaar area that are not specifically entrusted to the cantonment board. So what is now again it's saying? The main point is that the management and the responsibilities will not extend to private lands outside these classifications, meaning private lands outside bazaar are not under the management of the MEO. This is the main point which is to be considered here by everybody. So please friends, interpret these rules 9 and 9.3. Now what does Rule 9.5 says for Class A lands? Class A lands briefly mention that the management of Class A land is separate and does not include private land as defined in the TPA Act. So if you see Class A lands, TPA Act is not applicable on it. So now who is to maintain the GLR which was made in 1937 or so on? So GLR is being maintained in the 1937 CLA rules under Rule 10 and Rule 45. Now what does Rule 10.1 says? Maintenance of GLR. GLR for bazaar area. Now this is very important. Discussed that the requirements from MEO to maintain the GLR for lands within the bazaar area under the management of the board. This is all happening in 1937. So, we have to understand what is this Rule 10(1) speaking. Any land which was in the bazaar area, and the bazaar area notifications were done in 1801, 10, 1855 Army regulations. So, we need to interpret all this. So, the key point here stands is that the maintenance and the responsibility does not apply to private properties which are outside the bazaar area. So, let us say if we are a private property, this Rule 10 does not apply on us. You get it? So, friend, this is something which needs to be understood, and I know many people today have become the custodians or the consultants of cantonment laws after going through my videos, my website and my WhatsApp groups and my sharing of knowledge. Please, you ought to understand the core. How would you counter the GLR? See, GLR has been upheld in 2001 in Surinder Kumar Vakil's case of Sagar cantonment. So, this is how we, now Rule 45, subpara 3. Every transfer has to be reported to the MEO. So, the MEO is handling on both sides. He is even maintaining the GLR of the cantonment board, and he is even maintaining the GLR of the outside the bazaar area, which is said as per this rule. Now, reporting of outside the bazaar area explains that for lands outside the bazaar area, the executive officer must report any transfer or right or interest in immovable property to the MEO. So, who's the custodian who's maintaining? So, what is the MEO or what is the DO? He is the custodian of the land records. He is nothing more than that. It is the CO which has to, or the EO which executive officer has to report. So, the mechanism underlined here is the separation of administrative controls with private properties being outside the purview of the cantonment authority. So, nowhere we category 3 lands are under the purview of the MEO or the DO. So, they are not entitled to maintain our GLR. How do we get to this? We have to work hard. Class C, transfer of properties and notifications. Now, what does this say? Class C instead of section 3. Rule 45, 43, subpara 6, subpara 3, transfer of properties in bazaar area. Limitation of transfer describes the procedure and limitation of transferring properties within the bazaar area as governed by the cantonment board and the relevant rules. Now, what is the limitation of all the properties which are in the bazaar area? Now, this rule again does not apply to the private properties outside the bazaar area. Similarly, coming to Rule 45, 2, subpara 2, the reporting mechanism under section 287(2) of the 1924 Cantonment Act. Now, what does this say? That there could be a direct reporting to the MEO. Then, how when the information of any transfer which is directly sent to the MEO from the sub-registrar under section 287 subpara 2 of lands outside the bazaar area. So, that means there is no restriction as per these rules. So, again we will reinforce our rules pertaining to the communication of information and not the management of private lands, which remains outside the purview or control of the MEO and the CO. So, friends, please, this is very important. How we understand the maintenance of the GLR. So, now if I reinforce the entire discussion with you, that lands outside bazaar area and registered under TPA Act are private properties. It's simple and straight. because Grant Act doesn't apply on us 1895. So now we are not subjected to the management of the MEO, DO or CO. So how do we go about it? How do we prove it in the legal luminary or in the legal courts? So the clear statement is that the foundation for this classification of the Cantonment Act, the Transfer of Properties Act applicability, needs to be emphasized in your pleadings in the court. So this structural approach itself is an explanation which clearly delineates how the land in questions are considered private properties, and these private properties fall outside the management scope of the Cantonment Authority. If we can understand and bifurcate these things, if we can actually read into these rules starting from 1801, see, just reading rules made in 1937 CLA will not subject you to your benefit. You got to chronologically go in the reverse order, read 1925, read 1924 Cantonment Act, then 1912 Cantonment Code, 1899 Cantonment Code, House Property Register 1833, and then you will understand how TP Act, because TP Act came in 1882 and our registrations have been happening since 1801. In my earlier video, I just explained you that how sale deeds were being done from not only the Registration Act of 1877 but 1864 Cantonment Act, and prior to it under the Governor General orders, the regulation. So friends, I hope we can understand that if we are private lands, GLR becomes redundant for us. The minute anybody, I know there is a man in Jhansi Cantonment, he has been digging into a lot of records of GLR through RTIs, which he presumes and assumes. The minute we admit into the GLR, we are admitting into everything. We straightforwardly have to say that we do not come under the purview of the General Land Register or the Record of Rights, because we are private properties, category 3 lands. I know it's not easy. I know explaining the court and trying to garner a stay like what is just happening in Jalandhar Cantonment is not going to be easy. So guys, please wake up. Again I am saying, we are old grants, never converted into new grants by the British. The reason being, we were revenue free grants, and the Britishers were only subjecting us from 1802, 12, 1822, 1859, 55, 1877. We were supposed to be converted into new grants, but we were revenue free grants. Thank you. Good day.